I now have the privilege of inviting the former Assistant PF Commissioner, Government of India, Mr. Anil Narayanan. And he'll be doing his talk on labor laws and the challenges in private health sectors in implementing those. Mr. Anil Narayanan, please, it's all yours.
Distinguished doctors, the organizers of KPMBA, and all other honored persons present here for this session. When we talk about the implementation of the labor statutes, I'll put it like this: it is the most challenging task for any employer to implement the labor statutes in a hospital industry. It is not all that easy. I am not exaggerating. Yesterday, the Metropolitan Court of the Egmore has punished Jayapradha, the ex-MB, for not paying ESI contribution for 6 months imprisonment. The gravity of the non-implementation of the labor statute. We all take it for granted. Labor laws is something which we don't bother about it. And we have all been doing that. To run in an industry, you have your limitation to implement the labor statutes. But yesterday, the Metropolitan Magistrate has punished the ex-employer, an MB, for 6 months imprisonment for deducting the ESI contribution and not depositing with the PF authorities. It is not an exaggeration. So that is the gravity of the non-implementation of the labor statutes. So while looking at India, we have around 140 crores Indian population, where government can cater only organized sector, only maybe a very few percentage of the patients, I mean healthcare. So on the one side, you see the glittering glass buildings with all modern facilities of the hospital which you own. And the other side, which you own, mean you cater to the urban population, whereas the 80% of the Indian population is in the rural areas, which they don't have any facility. They have only government hospitals and government dispensaries where statistics says 20% of the doctors are on leave. So that is where the contradiction of private sector and the public sector and your challenge in implementation and the magnitude of the private hospitals in future. On the one side, you find technological intervention in the hospital industry. On the other side, you find difficulty in getting skilled manpower, namely doctors, qualified, competent doctors. I mean, to see it's a very, really challenging for a hospital industry to attract best talent from the market. So there it comes, the branding of a hospital. The doctors will not, if I will go and call a doctor and pay a double salary which you're offering, no doctor will come. Because there comes the branding of the hospital. The image of the hospital you build, then only you can attract best talent in the doctors. Not only that, the other scenario of paramedical staff, nurses, etc., they're all in shortage. Skilled manpower is really tough to get. And once you attract the skilled manpower, you have to train, you have to skill, and you have to upskill. Now you wanted multi-skilled nurses. Ultimately, they have to deal with the patients. And once you give satisfaction to the customers, only your brand will improve. So when we look at the healthcare, 2018, the World Health Organization has come out with health for all, health for everyone, health for everywhere. Now, how many years have passed? 5 years have passed. 194 countries representing the World Health Organization has constituted and come out with a campaign of health for all. We are still India may be much better than other underdeveloped countries. And on the other side, we have International Labour Organization representing 198 countries where they have campaigned to implement various labor legislations for attaining the objectives, namely social welfare, social security for the country. So, World Health Organization's point of view of total health care for all, and your challenge of International Labour Organization telling you comply with all labor statute. No child labor should be employed. You should not engage in employ more than 8 hours in a day. If you pay more than 8 hours in a day, you have to pay double wages overtime. Is it practically, how many establishments can afford to do that? And if you employ a person more than 5 days, 6 days, you will have to give weekly off. Okay, you must be giving, but then you have to pay 12 days casual leave, 12 days sick leave, and 12 days casual leave, sick leave, and 12 days earned leave. I'm sure that majority of the hospital cannot and will not afford to pay that leave for employees. Over and above, there is 13 national and festival holidays for a hospital industry, 4 national holidays and 9 festival holidays for all industries, where 10 or more employees are employed. But how many establishments are paying for that? So, so this is the challenge. The one side WHO says, the other side International Labour Organization says, comply with all labor statutes. Particularly in a developed country, you should not exploit laborers. You comply with the labor statutes. We have around more than, I think more than 100 labor statutes in state and central, and the implementation part, if you look at it, is really funny. We don't bother to implement those legislation, but for various reasons, because maybe you wanted to reduce the cost. So you want to reduce cost. So labor statutes, what I'm trying to tell you is the implementation part of the labor statute in a hospital industry and the challenges which I don't want to elaborate. I cannot, within 15 minutes, I can't afford to spend more time on various labor statutes. But the important legislation which you come across with more liability is on Provident Funded ESI. If you employ an employee, whether it is casual, temporary, bedeli, contract, trainees, etc., you have to come under the purview of the EPF Act, which I hope 99% of the establishment cannot afford to. But an authority can trouble you by instituting a prosecution, as that happened to Jayapradha yesterday. See, in Kerala, you have never come across an employer punished for 6 months imprisonment for non-payment of the ESI contribution. But still, I am sure that 95% of the establishment tend to avoid that. May not be to the full extent, but the consequence I am to project is, an authority can always create problems with an employer if they desire so. On the other side, Government of India is planning of ease of doing the business. Why ease of doing the business? To attract more and more foreign investors. In healthcare industry also, the multinational companies are coming into mergers, acquisitions, and tomorrow is going to be very competitive. Because multinational healthcare industries are going to tie up with the present industry existing in India, tying up mergers and acquisition. So their quality standards will be much, much higher than that of the Indian companies, Indian industry. So that is a challenge ahead. Technology is advancing. So what I'm trying to tell you is, implementing the labor statutes, I don't say that 100% there shouldn't be 0% non-implementation. To a certain extent, you should try to implement more and more labor statutes. Of course, there are problems in implementation of the labor statutes. But the time you spend unnecessarily for non-implementation is going to the authorities, going for litigations, paying money to the advocates, your headache, your tension, that costs very much for non-implementation. And your core activity of hospital and patient care is diverted. The employer will have to every time fight with the authorities, with the various assessment authorities, with the various codes. So that if you work out the cost, non-implementation is more expensive than implementation of labor statutes, and which we don't bother about that. Because being a doctor, your core activity is something different. The HR or human resources people who are managing it may not be aware of that. And they will mislead the government, the employer by stating that, oh, I don't want to comply with the labor statutes. I've been managing the show for nearly 20 years, 30 years without much problem. Now, as an HR man, now you are coming and telling all employees should be covered in the labor statutes. So our directive principles of the Constitution, Chapter 4 of the Indian Constitution envisages that every human being, every individual should be provided with adequate social security protection, adequate welfare of the employees. And in order to achieve the directive principles of the Constitution, the Government of India, the Government of Kerala has come out with so many labor legislations, and some of you must be thinking, why should we have more and more legislation when you cannot implement even 5% of the labor statutes? I'll disagree to that, because any legislation coming out, it will take years to establish, to implement the labor statute in an industry. So these are all stepping stones for every government. To achieve the directive principles of the Constitution, we have to have more and more labor legislation to comply with. Another important task which we have challenged before is as I told earlier, the paucity of human resources, doctors, non-doctors, nurses, and the extent of attrition. You find doctors leaving the organization, paramedical qualified competent nurses leaving the organization. To retain the best talent in the industry has become more and more professional, competitive. So how do you manage those things? It is not by the labor statute you manage the hospital. The moment you start an industry, the moment you engage an employee on an appointment letter, you enter into an agreement or a contract with the employer and employee. But how many establishments before me have issued appointment letters to the employees? The consequences are very, very discouraging to the employer if the appointment letters are not issued to them. So that is a legal provision. Once you enter into a contract with the employer-employee, then the Provident Fund, then ESI, for all employees, whether you employ a contract employee also, you have to cover them under the labor statute. So till his retirement, the labor laws provisions come into operation. So from the appointment to the retirement, the provisions of the labor laws will apply. So the importance of labor legislation is from the appointment to the retirement, the gamut of labor legislation is important for your effective implementation is highly necessary. And for branding your establishment, definitely an implementation is highly necessary. You look at Tata Hospital in Bombay, or for that matter, any Tata industry, there the implementation part of the labor statute is very, very high. And they have grown to such a level through implementation only, not through violation. You take Infosys, or for that matter, Deloitte. These are all companies which are more concerned, more worried about implementation of the labor statute, unlike our organization where we tend to non-implement and take profit out of that. So an organization can grow and develop only if the labor statutes are implemented to the maximum possible. And we should not take it for granted that this is my last priority. So the private sector's role in an Indian population, 140 crores population, it is growing again and again. The opportunity for a private sector to expand to urban, now you are in urban, in semi-urban area and rural area is tremendous. And I feel that the role of the private sector hospitals to introduce professional management system. When I talk about professional management system, from the appointment to the selection, you train them. How many doctors are willing to undergo a training in the hospital? For an HR team, it is very difficult. A doctor appointed in a hospital, he requires soft skill to deal with the patient, to interact with the patient relatives. And if you ask a doctor for undergoing a training on soft skill, it is, doctors will take it for granted they know how to. They will be excellent in their profession. But to deal with the patient, as a patient hearing to the patients. See, I read an article about Dr. Pai. He was very patient to listen to the doctor from the patient till the patient completes his dialogue. And how many doctors are willing to have a patient patient to hear the sick patients? So the soft skill to how to deal with the human beings is the most important thing, because the doctors are projecting your hospital outside. If you're not comfortable with the doctor, you don't go to the hospital. There are many doctors who are rough to his patients. He'll say, I don't want to have any comments. You listen what I say. I don't want to mention the doctors. Reputed doctors. Reputed doctors. Whereas, if you develop that soft skill means an empathy to a patient, then you are nothing like that, you are integrating your soft skill with the knowledge as a doctor. You will be nothing, he will be number one. So the doctors, so I think my time is running short. All the labor statutes which I cannot even spend 1 minute for that. But definitely an effective implementation of the labor statute will be welcome move for any hospital to survive and to progress further in a competitive environment like this, where the economy has been opened up from 1991 by Dr. Manmohan Singh, and now all multinational hospitals are coming to India, and unless you professionalize your hospital, unless you foresee the challenges you're going to come, every hospital will have tough time. That is what Orvo, Kodak film, what happened? Kodak closed the entire unit and 7,000 employees lost their job because they did not transfer from the digital cameras to the old traditional film. It's a typical example. So technology is passed ahead. And unless you change not only technology, unless you line up your supporting team, paramedical, nurses, etc., you have the survival will be very tough. And I hope my time is running short. Thank you very much for sharing my views with you. Thank you very much.
Sir,
Okay.
1 or 2 points to clarify. There was something called Industrial Relations Committee. ചെത്ത് തൊഴിലാളികൾക്കും പ്ലാന്റേഷൻ തൊഴിലാളികൾക്കൊക്കെ ഉണ്ട്, ഡോക്ടേഴ്സിനുണ്ട്. പക്ഷേ QPMBക്ക് അതിൻ്റെ ഒരു ഇമ്പോർട്ടൻറ്റ് റോൾ കിട്ടിയിട്ടില്ല. യു ഹാഡ് റെപ്രസെൻറ്റഡ് ദ ലേബർ മിനിസ്റ്റർ ഫോമർലി, ബട്ട് യു ഹാവ് നോട്ട് ഗോട്ട് എനി പോസിറ്റീവ് റെസ്പോൺസ്. ഇറ്റ് ഇസ് നമ്പർ 1. Secondly, IMA is charged 52 crore rupees as GST. Indian Medical Association, the national IMA. Of course, the hospital cannot survive with such a heavy GST payment. And third is the Employment Provident Fund. The amount is being increased every year. It's not affordable for the private hospitals.
Provident Fund.
Thank you very much, sir, for the very relevant questions. What we will do is, as we are short on time, as we all know, Advocate Anil Narayanan sir has been with QPMB for a very long time. 10 years back, he had come to our Valra major meeting and he has answered all questions, very relevant questions. Sir, please note all these questions down. And we'll have a Zoom session specially on this topic because this is going to take at least 1 hour. And we have got extremely eminent people and lots of questions to them. We'll compile all this is a promise from the organizing committee. We'll be compiling all the questions and then please leave it at the registration counter and each of the speakers will be given separate Zoom meetings. Sir has already addressed us twice on Zoom. So sir, please note that I'll write down. We'll address all these questions, extremely relevant questions, and we are extremely grateful to Advocate Anil Narayanan sir for spending his time with us. And I'm sure he'll continue to do that. I'll keep disturbing you, sir. Please be with us. Thank you.